Okay, now I'm going to create some getters. I want to be able to have access to X and Y from the enemy class and from the tower class. Turns out, since these guys are private, I can't access them directly, and so I need to, just like we have in the past, set up a couple of getters. So I'm going to say public int, and I'm going to say get X, and this is just simply going to return X value. So that's simple. I'll say return X, and then I'll do the same thing for Y. So I'll copy this whole guy over. I should probably get one for get name too, but maybe I'll do that later. So this is going to be get Y, and it's going to return Y. And I'm going to create another class, and I'm going to be able to use get Y and get X so I can access these guys from another class. So let's go ahead and make another class. I'm going to come over here, and the new class is going to be a bullet class, and the bullet class is going to extend game object as well. So let's open this guy up. In fact, just to make this simple, I'm going to open this guy up. I'm going to copy all of this code, and I'll just copy it into my bullet class. Probably not a great idea in general, but for the sake of the video, it'll speed things up a bit because I don't type very quickly. In any case, I'm going to go ahead and simply change this to bullet, and I'll do the same thing for all the other places where I have the word tower. So this class bullet is going to extend game object. It's going to have the same information here. I can get rid of these guys, and I think I will uncomment this. So let's see there, and so now I am inside my bullet, and I can give X, Y, and I can give name. Okay, so now if I create a bullet, I can come back inside my runner. So here is my game runner, and I will create a game object. So it's going to be of type, it's going to be a bullet. So I'll call this guy B1, and I will say bullet. And instead of putting these guys in, when you put a bullet on a screen, you probably want it to be where the turret would be. So I can actually say in here t1.getX, and that is a getter. I can't just put X directly because X is private, and I can do the same thing over here for t1.getY, and again that's a method, so I use my parentheses, and I'm going to call this guy bullet. So when I create my new bullet, it's going to be at the same location. This is going to return an integer, and this is going to return an integer. It's going to return the X and Y location of the turret, and I want to send that up so the bullet will have that same location. And of course this guy will be named bullet, and let's be consistent and call this guy enemy1 with a capital E, and that will work. Just to make sure, I'll go ahead and do a system.out.println, and let's go ahead and say B1 to string, and let's see what this guy gives me. If I compile it, and it says it doesn't know what a bullet is because I've used a lowercase b. So let's try that again. And now if I were to run this, I'm going to see printed onto the screen inside bullet, because I have a toString method inside here, and it has the same location as the tower because I used getX and getY inside the game object class, not inside the tower1 class. But it works, and I find out where tower1 is located. Okay, now I'm going to add another method. I was trying to think of a method that would be useful for all of these things, for all these different types of classes, or all my different objects, let's say. And so during the run of the game, I might want any one object to know how far away it is from some other object. And so inside my game object class, I'm going to create a distance method. And the distance method is going to be fairly simple. I'm just going to come down here, and again, I'm going to say public. And this is going to return a double, which is going to be the distance between two objects. And so I'll call this guy distance, and it's going to take in two ints, which are going to be the X and Y location. So I'll say int X and int Y, and these are the X and Y location of some other object. And I can go ahead and set this up where I say int dx is equal to this x minus x. So this x is the location of this x refers to the x that's being defined inside of this class, and this is the parameter that's being passed in. And I can do the same thing for dy. So I'll say the y difference is this y minus y, and that should be a minus sign, not an equals, excuse me. And so now I want to return the value, which is the difference between these two. So I can say, for instance, return, I'll say math dot square root, and I'm going to send in dx using the Pythagorean theorem times dx plus dy times dy. And so this is going to give me the distance. So if I have an enemy object and I want to find out how far away it is from something else, let's go ahead and do that right now. Let's go ahead and say, back in the runner class, I want to use this, and so I can say, let's go ahead and take system.out.println, and I'm going to take the distance. No, didn't want to do that. So what? Let's try that again. So I'm going to take this, and I'm going to say distance is equal to, and I'm going to use that method I just created. And so let's just go ahead and take t1, and I'm going to take distance. Now again, that's a method that I created inside the abstract class, and I'm going to take, let's say, b1, and I'll use the getters again, get x, and that will tell me the x value of where that guy is, and I'll say b1 dot get y, again parentheses because that's a method, and let's see if that compiles, and it should tell me what the distance is between t1 and b1. Now notice, since they have the same location, the distance, if I've done this correctly, should be 0. So let's go ahead and run this and say the distance is, sure enough, 0.0. Now since you're dealing with pixels, it occurs to me that maybe the best thing, maybe I don't need to make this a double. Maybe I could simply return an int, and even though my math square root is going to return a double, let's see if I cast this to an int and compile that. It says that's fine, and so now when I run this again, it's going to say, instead of 0.0, it'll just say the distance is 0. So I'm dealing with an int. And so that is another use of something where if I want all of my different gain objects to have access to a distance method, rather than writing that in each of these different classes, I just write it in my abstract class once, and now I can take the distance between any two objects just by using that one method. Okay, so the last thing we're going to do in this video is we're going to go ahead and do something else that I think is very nifty. We're going to go ahead and make an array list of game objects. And so to do that, I simply use a game object here. And what's interesting is that this array list can be filled up with all kinds of different game objects, any of these objects that extend game objects. So here's my game objects, and that's equal to a new array list. And now that I've got this set up, all I have to do is, instead of setting each of these guys up like I have here, let's go ahead and comment that out, and instead I will say game object, whoops, I'm going to go ahead and add this differently. So let's set up and say game objects, and I'm going to use my add method, and I'm going to add a new enemy. So instead of calling this guy enemy E1, I'm going to take this and I'm going to add that in here. So I'm creating a new object, same way I did before, but instead of creating it as enemy E1, I'm going to create this and add it to my game objects array list. And so I'll add that guy. Remember, these guys get added on to the end, And so I'm going to go ahead and add a tower, just like I did before, I'll create it just like I did before, but now this guy will be um, just added to my array list of game objects. And the same thing for my bullet, I'll create a new bullet and I will load that guy in here. And so now if I want to print these guys, I can't just say E1, T1, and B1 because I've taken those guys out. In fact, let me just delete those altogether. And instead I'm going to use game objects and I'm going to use get. And what I'm going to have to get here is, let's see, dot get, and I'll choose 0. And I'll do the same thing. Interesting, this should be game objects. This should be game objects. And this should be game objects. And I'll do the same thing here. I'll say game objects dot get. And of course I'm going to have to get different ones. So I'll get 1 and I will get 2. And actually the should be in reverse order. So this guy, let's see, I'm adding the enemy first. So this should be the enemy now. This should be the tower and this should be the bullet. Let's go ahead, compile that, and it is expecting a curly brace. Sorry, an angle brace here. And let's try it again. Array list. Okay, so I haven't added the array list. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to say import java.util. I'm just going to import everything and compile that. And oh, T1. Okay, so this is going to be a little bit more confusing. T1.get. So to get the turret, I'm adding the turret in at place 1, so I'm going to have to use game objects get 1 instead of T1, just like I did a moment ago. So let's put that in, and I'm going to say get X, and the same thing over here, game object get T1. Let's see if that is happening now. And again, the bullets, let's see, the bullet is my third guy, so he's going to be at 0. And same thing for here. This guy is going to be at 0. So now these guys are packed in an array list. It turns out it seems like that's a little bit tougher, but in a lot of ways it's going to make life easier. Okay, so I just had to stop this for a minute. BlueJ has a habit of code just simply disappearing. I had to shut down BlueJ and open it back up, and the code reappeared. In any case, it's a little bit more tricky, so instead of here just saying t1.distance, I've got to go into my array list, I've got to get the object, the tower object, and I've got to take the distance between that and whatever else I have. In this case, game objects got 2. So I'm putting in at 0, that's the going to be the last object I put in. So I'm putting in an enemy, a tower, and a bullet. So it should be enemy, tower, and bullet. Is that right? Let's go ahead and run it and see what I'm getting out. So I'm saying void main, and if I put this guy in, enemy, tower, and then bullet. Okay. So this guy is going to be at index 0, index 1, and index 2. And you can see the distance is 0. So it might seem like this is a little bit more complicated to write the code like this, because before I was just using T1. But imagine if you have an array list of all of your game objects. In any game, sort of the two fundamental points are you've got to first of all update every frame. So let's say a frame is going to happen 30 times a second. So 1/30th of a second, you've got to check every single object, update its location and its appearance and its status and so forth, and then you've got to redraw it to the screen, and you keep doing that over and over. And so if you can pack all of your objects into a single array, or group arrays, group objects into different kinds of, let's say, objects, it's going to make that part of the code much simpler. And so even though it looks like you're paying a little bit more here, the cost in the long run is going to really work out to your advantage.